In this next session, I'd like to talk about the research that I've done into leadership in project management. Within the project management community, there are two pervading beliefs. One is almost can be expressed that the project manager's competence, including the leadership style, is not a success factor on projects. All the research into success factors on projects is focused on the tools and techniques project managers use to manage projects and have ignored almost studiously the project manager's competence as a success factor on projects. And in fact, there was an advertisement in a project management magazine in the UK once that said if you can move a mouse, you can manage a project. All you need to do to manage a project is get hold of our software. It'll make you a good project manager. Well, my daughter could move a mouse when she was 3 years old. And so it's actually, if you think about it, it's quite insulting of project managers to ignore their contribution to the success on projects. And a related belief is that once the project manager has learnt all the tools and techniques, he can manage any project from any technology. Project management is not domain specific and is independent of the temperament of the project manager. So in fact, we did research into project management. We did qualitative followed by quantitative, inductive interviews followed by a deductive quantitative survey. And in fact, we had two research models. The first one suggested that the leadership competencies on projects contributed to project success. And so the independent variable leadership competencies, and we measured that by a 15-factor model grouped into three high-level factors: emotional intelligence, managerial competence, and intellectual competence. And we sort of looked at how the independent variable contributes to project success. And then there was a moderation variable. We looked at whether or not this relationship changed by type of project. We actually measured project success. I'll touch on this by asking the survey members to say how well their project performed against 10 success factors, success criteria, and then ask them to say how important the success criteria were to their project. We didn't want to insist that every project manager achieve every success criterion if some of the criteria weren't relevant to their project. And so the success of the project was the weighted average of these 10 success criteria multiplied by the weighting the project manager attached. But having done that, we were able to do a second research model. We were actually able to look at other data we gathered: the project type, the sector, and the project manager's traits, including nationality, age, gender, certification, education, and job title, and actually see how each one of those dimensions contributed to the importance attached to the success criteria, and how each one of those dimensions contributed to how well the project manager performed against the 10 success criteria. And actually, having asked the project managers to rank the 10 success criteria, we were able to relate as a fourth hypothesis how the 10 success criteria related to how well project managers performed. When I get there, you'll actually find that primarily it was only the latter relationship that had much impact. The importance project managers attached to the 10 success criteria impacted on how well they performed. So as I say, we conducted interviews. We interviewed the managers of project managers to find the criteria they used for selecting project managers. We interviewed 14 companies from a range of countries and a range of industries. And in fact, we did actually find that when managers appointed project managers, they did take account of their competence. They almost always took account of the project manager's technical knowledge, but sometimes, often, their management skill and expertise. The leadership style of the project manager was really only more important on more complex projects. There was a bit of an issue about task focus versus people focus, and in fact, usually on technical projects, people thought the technical focus, the technical skills of the project manager was important, and on organisational change projects, and people thought the organisational skills of the project manager was important. But in fact, I interviewed somebody from the Austrian airline, Austria Telekom, and she said that project managers in Austria Telekom underwent a fundamental transformation. They would spend their time when they were a project team member complaining the project manager was task-focused and not people-focused, but the day they became a project manager, they became task focused. And so there are a number of things people took account of in appointing project managers: the ability to communicate, mentioned 8 times, the ability to deal with complexity, contract type, cultural sensitivity, the ability to deal with a client, and then sort of lesser things: the duration and budget of the project, the location of the work, the type of assignment. In fact, 2 interviewees mentioned the ability to balance work-home life, which we found very significant, that at least 2 companies are taking account of the ability to balance work-home life. And then finally, whether or not the project was a development of opportunity for the project manager. So we then conducted the survey. We actually got 400 usable responses to our survey, which is very good, because in fact it means the results are generalizable to the world population. And we found that on all projects, the emotional intelligence of the project manager was a success factor on projects. And this was actually very important. It was the first time in project management that anyone had actually identified the importance of the emotional intelligence of the project manager to the success of the project. And I'll actually come back to that when I talk about project marketing. Actually, with all projects, conscientiousness, sensitivity, and the ability to communicate was important. Conscientiousness is something that kept on occurring, and in fact our results show that actually project managers are more conscientious than general managers. It was sort of something again that came out of our results. Project managers on average were actually more conscientious than general managers. But the ability to communicate was also important, but in fact our results show that project managers are worse at communicating than general managers. Something that causes a bit of controversy is we found actually that strategic perspective was negatively correlated with success. The more strategic perspective the project manager had, the less successful their projects. And people say, oh no, it's important that the project manager understands strategy. But it's important that the project manager understands strategy, but the project manager mustn't be distracted by strategy. The project manager actually has to focus on the project and not get distracted by the bright lights of strategy. So the project manager's got to understand why the project's strategically important, and Paul will talk about that later. But in fact, the project manager mustn't get distracted by the bright lights of strategy. On engineering projects, IT projects, and organisational change projects, it was emotional intelligence, and emotional intelligence. It shows a sort of lower level competencies varied by type of projects, and so in fact different projects do require different competencies. Different types of projects require different competencies of project managers. So the project manager can't pick up the little kit bag and go off and manage all types of projects. Then on mandatory projects, repositioning projects, so this is strategic importance, mandatory repositioning and renewal projects. In fact, on mandatory projects, managerial competence turned out to be important. And in fact, this is interesting. Mandatory projects is where the government changes the law and you have to make a change to adhere to the new law. And then cost is important. So on mandatory projects, cost is important. Where cost was important, then managerial competence was important. But on repositioning and renewal projects, it was emotional competence again. But then on fixed price contracts, where cost is important again, the managerial competence was correlated with success. And in fact, on remeasurement contracts, there was emotional intelligence and intellectual competence were actually correlated with success. We also measured the profiles of successful project managers. The black dotted line is engineering project managers, the red dotted line is IT project managers, and the solid blue line is organisational change project managers. And you see the emotional competencies, which is sort of top left, are more important with organisational change managers. The intellectual competencies are quite important with IT managers, and the managerial competencies with managerial project managers. This just shows mandatory renewal and repositioning projects. And perhaps repositioning is just another word for organisational change, so it's not surprising that the profile for repositioning project managers and organisational change project managers is almost the same. But what was surprising was that the profile for renewal project managers and IT project managers is almost the same again. And in fact, we asked IT project managers why this might be, and they said most IT projects are actually now renewing the organisation's IT infrastructure and not creating it from the scratch. And so, in fact, IT project managers were not surprised that the profiles of IT project managers and renewal project managers was almost the same. As I said, trying to correlate the factors to whether or not it meant they ranked different things as important and they achieved different things important didn't actually throw up much. One slightly strange outcome was that computing and organisational change project managers claimed marginally better performance than engineering project managers. And you think, well, engineering projects are actually perhaps easier than IT and organisational change, and so why are the project managers of ICT and organisational change claiming better performance? Well, the emphasis there is on the word claim. You know, perhaps an engineering project manager, if they're 5% overspent, they think that's a complete disaster, whereas an IT project manager, if they're only 20% underspent, they think that's wonderful. So though we sort of think that, you know, our engineering projects are more likely to be overspent than IT projects, because of that, IT project managers might be happier with worse performance. Gender, I thought that men might be better at finishing on cost and time, or might rank cost and time higher, and women might rank satisfaction of stakeholders higher. In fact, there was no difference in the ranking of the criteria, and I thought men might perform better on the technical outcomes and women better on the stakeholder outcomes, but there was no difference in performance. And in fact, that was almost a bit of a phew moment. Oh, good. We found no difference between men and women on projects. That's actually almost comforting. But in fact, the big difference, as I said, was the way they ranked the criteria with the performance. And this actually shows, actually unfortunately, the way the slides perform is very difficult to see. So the black boxes show very strong correlation between the importance of the criteria. The vertical columns are the importance attached to the criteria. The horizontal columns are how well they're performed. And in fact, you expect to see the diagonal there. So if somebody thinks recurring business is important, you expect them to do well against recurring business. If customer satisfaction is important, you expect them to do well against customer satisfaction, and so on down. Actually, I was just sort of saying, unfortunately, the black is strong correlation, there's grey, which is weak correlation, and unfortunately, the grey doesn't show terribly well. So in fact, what you see is the criterion you rank this as important that has the biggest impact on success is team satisfaction. And I sort of ask, you know, are we surprised? If the project manager thinks team satisfaction is important, that has the biggest impact on project success. What you can't see, because the greys are missing, is that the one that has the second biggest impact is end user satisfaction, and the one that has the third biggest impact is customer satisfaction. So in fact, the three ranking the criterion important, the three that have the biggest impact on project success are three relating to stakeholder satisfaction: team satisfaction, end user satisfaction, customer satisfaction. And this is what's repeatedly coming out in project management now, is that satisfaction of stakeholders is the success factor after the project manager's competence and has almost the biggest impact on project success. And so I put a little summary that organisations need to understand their type of projects and develop a pool of project managers with competencies appropriate for their type of projects. Now, I'm not saying that you should go and look at what we thought were the competencies of engineering project managers and say that's right. We think that we have actually identified the competencies of engineering project managers, but if you're doing engineering projects, your projects might be slightly different. You need to look at the competencies which are important for your types of projects. Then you select people as you appoint them to the pool of project managers. You don't think about, is this person competent when you make them a project manager. You want to think about whether they're competent for your types of projects as you appoint them to be project managers. Then you want to define career structure for project managers, different level of project managers, and understand the competencies at different levels and how those competencies match the projects that you do at different levels. A friend and colleague of mine called Martina Weyman actually did research in project-oriented organisations, and she found only 1/3 of project-oriented organisations had a career structure for project managers, 1/3 used the career structure for engineers, and 1/3 had no career structure for project managers. And she was talking about an organisation that had 3 project managers and 3 projects. One project manager had 15 years experience, one 5 years, one 15, one 10, one 5. One project was 5 million euros, one was 50 million euros, one was 500 million euros. Which project manager do you use for which project? Well, you might say it's obvious, the 5 years for the 5 million and the 10 years for the 50 and the 15 years for the 500. But because they had no career structure for project managers, they had no rational way of making that decision. So organisations need career structures for project managers so they can rationally assign people to projects. And so you need to differentiate the competencies at different levels of project management and different types of projects. So, thank you.